All right. Hello, everybody. This is Justice with Jax, Season 3, Episode 1. And I am your host, Jacqueline Armendariz Unzueta, also known as Jax. Today is Friday, April 18, 2025. And it's been 1 year, 8 months, 18 days, or 627 days since the case Armendariz and Chinook Center versus the city of Colorado Springs has been filed. And so, as we know, this show is about the story of that case and so much more about the community. So, you know me, my pronouns, she, her, ella. I am so stoked to have an incredible guest today. I'm going to let him introduce himself. I'm passing the mic to Mike.
Thank you, Jax. My name is Mike Williams, he, him. I'm a official member of Men of Influence, and I've been, a lifelong Colorado Springs resident. I've been here since I was 6 months old, so southeast side of the city. So definitely honored to be here.
Thank you, Mike. And I didn't know that you were so rooted in this community.
Oh, yeah.
And so we're going to definitely talk from that perspective more. And I just want to say, we're going to get into it more, but he's being really humble about all the ways that he's been involved in community. So I'm glad we have this space to talk a little bit more about all the work that you've done.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so just want to give a quick update for those that have been following this journey with us. So the U.S. civil rights case that I'm named in, that our local nonprofit Chinook Center is named in, where the biggest arguments are really standing for our First Amendment and Fourth Amendment rights. So that's free speech and privacy. As we shared, it's been a journey. It's been more than a year. And now where we are, having started from the initial event that really triggered this case, which was a housing rights protest in 2021, now where we are is that we are in the U.S. District 10th Circuit Court of Appeals in Denver. And as of today, we understand that May 13 is when oral arguments in our case will be presented. And so what does that really mean? It means it's a super trippy reality for those of us involved in this case that we are suing the city, the police department, and the FBI, like the U.S. government. And, if you have some opinions about the U.S. government right now and how things are going, that's super valid. And so it's a strange time to be at this level of the legal system because, as folks who listen to this show, I don't call it the justice system, and that's honestly deliberate. And so part of this show being a vehicle for this story and knowledge too is that people should know. I wanted to share that the jurisdiction of this court is actually 6 different states. And so it takes cases from Oklahoma, Kansas, New Mexico, Colorado, of course, Wyoming, and Utah. Fun fact, didn't know this, but this is why we like to share knowledge. It also hears cases in portions of the Yellowstone National Park extending into Montana and Idaho.
Interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
I had no idea. So that's a whole other rabbit hole that we could go down. But one of the things that I wanted to talk with you, Mike, about is that I just wanted to say, and it will never be said enough, is that I'm really grateful to know you. And one of the best parts about, I think, the work that we do is when you do community work, there's a richness that is, like, to me, better than money from the relationships that you build and the impact that you can make. So you mentioned, you're a member of Men of Influence, and you're even the former Citizens Project executive director. And so if someone hasn't met you yet, but they're listening today, what would you share about that part of your life and anything else about yourself?
Yeah, no, I think community has always been a big thing for me. My dad grew up in Atlanta during the Civil Rights Movement. So, that just was
what an influence.
Yeah, right. A huge influence on my mom. My dad was real calm and humble, but he always fought for the right thing. So that just was passed down to me. And my mom was more of the avid fighter, and I kind of got a little mix of both of that from him. But and then educational advocacy is a huge thing. Co-founded Neighbors for Education. During a tumultuous time in our city with school, school boards are getting hijacked, and the average race a few years, 6 years ago, could be won with $15,000. The winning candidates on average, and then they invested over $1 million into like these school board races locally.
Right. And would you call that dark money?
Oh, 100%. It was absolutely intentional. Colorado is a hard state for some of these groups to win in statewide. So what they did is they took that money, and invested that at lower levels, like school board, etc. And they really have flipped the city upside down. So that work led me into meeting a wide array of different people. It led me to Citizens Project, which was a good and busy 2.5 years, working on like voter access, education, and really trying to, the part of the community, HD 17, that is forgotten a lot, trying to bring some resources and education, et cetera, to that part of the community. And then life happens, and a shift happened, and I was gone a lot. They had missed my kids and my family, so end up leaving Citizens Project after 2.5 years, and I can't not do community work. So doing a lot of work with Men of Influence, who I've been doing work with since their inception about almost 4 years ago.
I know, it's gone fast, and it's been incredible to see the impact. And that's one thing that I think is tough about community work, because it comes from a place of passion usually, right, but it's going to take time to see the impact. And just for folks listening, you mentioned HD 17, which is the state ledge House District 17. Right. And so would you say like that area is largely like Southeast Colorado Springs, right?
100%. It's more commonly known as Southeast of the city, and its city council district 4, makes up the majority of the Southeast district as well. But it's the only majority minority district in El Paso County. Actually, in El Paso County for sure. And it's a big district, but it's the third lowest voting in the state, and that district. So
brutal.
The Colorado's the second highest voting state in the country. The voting there is so bad, and we're encouraging people, and there's a bunch of different reasons, and we definitely learned about that. But if the voting in HD 17 was the same as other districts, Colorado would be the number one voting state in the country. Like, wow. I don't think people realize one district has such a big makes such a big deal. But majority district, a majority minority district rather, third lowest voter turnout and 14 years shorter life expectancy than our districts. So we moved back there a few years back, and that's where I grew up. My house is a street away from where I grew up as a kid, and we're really invested in the community down there.
I feel that. And that's part of how we met, right? Is like we are both Southeast Colorado Springs residents, and we know, unfortunately, the really negative statistics that impact us. And like, there's other data out there that shows if you can look at the county kind of zip code or neighborhood wise, we're also where like the most people have been incarcerated, right. And there's a striking inequity in that. And so thanks for giving people like a little bit more context about like where we're coming from. Right. And, frankly, that's a part of our passion, is advocating for a community that has been historically resourced, frankly, And so given people are definitely probably getting the vibe from you that you are civics oriented. And I find some difficulty with that. I think people know, where I stand. Like I'm a partisan. Like you're not going to find me hanging out with too many Republicans. Right. We still got to talk to them. But that being said, one of the unique aspects I feel like of our relationship is that we have actually experienced like firsthand, really in the same time, the value of the work of the American Civil Liberties Union of Colorado, because we have both been involved in cases that this organization has undertaken to really protect people's rights and freedoms. And so would you mind sharing a little bit more about that part of the journey that you've taken? And we can talk a little bit about the judge in that case. I'm not going to talk about him as much. Maybe you might, Mike. Yeah. There's some reasons why. But I think people would really benefit from your knowledge on explaining that, especially because it's directly related to what we were just discussing, which is extremely poor voter turnout in our City Council District 4 and House District 17 area.
Yeah, so it's over the years, it's been very intentional that Colorado Springs municipal election is in the springtime, April. We just got done with the city council race, and the voter turnout is significantly lower.
It makes me want to cry.
Yeah, it makes me want to cry. It's significantly lower, right? So as Citizens Project was involved with the ACLU, actually shortly before I got there, working that case back and forth. And it just happened to be that when I got hired, I was a resident of that area, from the area. I mean, of my 36 years of life, like 32 have been in that area, or 31. So essentially what we were talking about is going through a bunch of data. And the thing that was really interesting in the discovery process and all that was there was people on city council that were running for mayor or running for different things that like actually mentioned between each other that the municipal election should be moved from April to November, right? There's significantly about 2 to 3 times more voter turnout in November. Most of the time when people are thinking about elections, they think about November. So we did a low voter turnout survey before this stuff happened, et cetera, just kind of in the Southeast CY. And the reality is we were in a room with, hundreds of people, and less than 10 knew that there was a election in April, right?
Absolutely brutal. And I will just jump and say, like, I'm a nerd, like I'm on that, so I can understand why people would be missing it.
Right.
And I just want to put a finer point on what you said, which is that basically in the course of looking at the documents in the case, really the people that were being sued, which is the city, right? City council, even they are on paper admitting that moving the election to the fall would be beneficial. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So like as that discovery process was we can go back like really 10 years, 10 years and even before that. So there's people that said things 10, 15 years ago that were brought up in the discovery process and, asking about why it isn't in November, et cetera. And it just kind of showed, like it just highlighted it, if you want the most amount of people to truly speak their voices, you got to meet the people where they're at. And most people realize, like, they think about voting and they think about November automatically. They're thinking of presidential elections, etc., which are important. But the things that people that affect us on a daily basis, like these municipal elections,
local government,
school board, etc., like those are things that have a little bit less turnout because it's not it's not midterm elections, it's not a presidential election. They're like quote unquote off-season elections, which I don't believe in. Like there's never an off election. So yeah, I mean that whole process was interesting. So that case was filed. Did the deposition. They had me. They asked me if I ever been deposed, and I was like no. And then they probably wish they didn't depose me. It ate them alive just because the lived experience, right? Yeah. It was just a lived experience, and the ACLU and the Harvard Law Clinic really prepared us. For that deposition. And mine was the longest one, I think, of everybody. And it was just shorter after that. But you can kind of see the angle that they were taking. I don't feel like their lawyers were taking it as seriously. They're asking, I don't think they took it as seriously. I don't think they really realized the impact. And even talking to legislators at the Capitol that represent us here in Colorado Springs, they didn't take it that seriously. There are some legislators here that didn't take it seriously. Yeah, but it's not surprising. And they really have an agenda to make sure that voter suppression is a real thing, right? In Colorado, as a state.
As Colorado, we tend to think like, oh, we have a blue trifecta. Everything's great here. We can look at other states and be like, whew, glad I'm in Colorado. And yet there is still a lot of work to be done. 100%. Exactly what you were talking about on this subject. Sorry to interrupt.
No. I mean, you bring up a phenomenal point. It's like, I think that's kind of was the difficulty in the case because it was in Colorado. And it wasn't like this obvious, like gerrymandering, et cetera, that was happening. But an intentional effort was made to make sure that, there was less, drop-off boxes as an example in the Southeast compared to other districts, right? Like you can't go downtown and walk 500 feet without probably walking past a drop-off point or something like that downtown. And in the Southeast, there's a baseball field and there's a drop-off box that Leon Young baseball field.
That used to be my box. Yeah.
And then, but people would drive by and think it was closed because the gate was closed, but one gate was open. And, and it's just silly things like that.
So subtle, and yet they make impact.
Absolutely. Right? And I do, and it's hard. Like I know, like me and you talk all the time, but I will give a shout out to our county clerk and recorder because
Steve.
Yeah, because there's a lot of things I disagree with him on, but as this process, a lot of things I disagree with him on, but as this process was going back and forth, he did a very good job because he wasn't even listed in the lawsuit, right? But he did a very good job of like hearing us out and adding like drop boxes in the Southeast or making them moving some to more high traffic areas, right? And we're trying to
Sure.
get one still at the Chinook Center as an example, but
That'd be awesome.
they're really open. He was really open to that, and my experience with him, even the prison voting program, I thought he was going to be a problem because he didn't go to the trainings that the state did. He was one of the county commissioners that testified against that, but Colorado Springs actually has the most robust jail-based voting system in the state.
I had no idea.
Yeah, I didn't know either until we actually were going through it.
That is so important.
So,
I'm kind of surprised because the sheriff has a role in
100%.
facilitating as well. And
right.
There's plenty of times, especially in this chaos era, prove me wrong.
Right.
I'd love to be
100%.
wrong about some things.
And again, I don't want to get it twisted. The sheriff wasn't as great, but what he allowed to happen was he allowed the county clerk and his team to go in there. They only had to have specific hours. He gave them 2 days. And they're doing a phenomenal job. So it's just another accessibility point. But again, kind of going back to the case more, it was going through that process was interesting for me, just really seeing our legal system, because I do agree it's not really a justice system, it's an injustice system, and a lot of it's whoever has the most money wins, in a lot of these cases.
Power and privilege.
Right, 100%.
Yep.
Like the resources is a big thing. And luckily for Citizens Project at the time, us as Southeast residents, the resources wasn't a problem because the Harvard Law Clinic has some of the best law students in the country, and arguably, and phenomenal attorneys. And they were helping us a lot with that. And then one of our attorneys at the time went to the ACLU, and then so it was ACLU / Harvard Law Clinic, and that just brought in more resources.
I see.
So we were able to go to the case, the courthouse, and our really realistically it got reassigned. So that's another thing.
To another
judge. So the first judge we had was the first queer judge in that circuit.
Was it Sweeney?
Yeah, it was Judge Sweeney. A very positive judge when it comes to labor, voting rights, things like that. On certain things,
capable of discernment
100%.
in these really complex issues.
100%, because their case is complicated, right? Originally, I think it went to the chief judge, and then he saw the complexity and was next on the will, and it happened to be Judge Sweeney. Judge Cruz actually, I think, got appointed around that time.
He is a Biden,
Biden
appointee. And so I remember when we were talking, we both the cases got taken out of Judge Sweeney's docket, and both our cases moved to Judge Cruz.
Right.
And I've said it on this show before, the decision that Judge Cruz made in Armendariz and Chinook versus City of Colorado Springs was an error.
Right.
And that is why we are in the 10th Circuit, because we are pushing back on that error because this case is so consequential.
Right.
And I do believe Judge Cruz made an error in the case that with Citizens Project as well.
Right. And the argument that, the city's attorneys and the amount of money the city spent on attorneys for this case made me sick, because I'm half that money you guys could have fixed
just
what we
moved
asked. You could have
the
moved
election.
the election like we were talking about.
Yeah.
But saying that to say, he found that, we didn't have standing. It was Citizens Project, League of Women Voters.
I don't even understand that.
Yeah, he said we didn't have standing. And there was a few other
as civic organizations.
Right.
How could you say that?
And it's insane.
Local civic organizations.
Yeah, absolutely insane. And I think Judge Cruz is really measured in a lot of different things, and I think I know he takes it seriously. I just think that was a misstep in our case, and there's other options to go back and forth on. But in that process, with Judge Sweeney, she admonished the city because they didn't prepare. They took all of our files as an example from discovery and had that as one exhibit.
Judge is probably not going to like that.
No, so you could just tell they weren't taking it seriously. Their whole plan was to argue standing, and I don't think that would have necessarily worked with Judge Sweeney. I think Judge Cruz has had some fair rulings, and he's also had some rulings that aren't fair. And I think that was a lucky argument, a lucky switch for the city that it did go to Judge Cruz, because he's a very technical judge. So they argued on some of those technicalities, and he found that we didn't have standing. And another option could be like us, and this is what we were talking about later in the game when we found out this was happening, is since I am a lifelong Southeast resident, I could be the one to help
as an individual,
right? Or even get some people there. The challenge with that is getting people in the community together, showing actual harm, like this person passed away early, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. My dad died in his 50s, as an example. We're in the Southeast. He died in his 50s. Average life expectancy is in the 70s, right?
Yeah.
And that's where he spent his formative years, right, in the Southeast. So that's where I was raised. So it was just a different strategy, and then that was on pause, and the case got dismissed on standing. They didn't throw out the case and say it wasn't different things weren't relevant. It was just a standing thing, which obviously I just vehemently disagreed with.
Certainly.
But they really got out of it on a technicality. But there's been some work done after that to kind of circumvent the court and try to make sure there's more voting access. Colorado Common Cause has done a phenomenal job. They led an effort to get a Colorado Voting Rights Act passed. And that just passed the House, I believe, or passed the committee. So it'll have a state House vote, and then it'll go to the Senate. But it's just interesting on that whole experience, learning why the city does it that way. There were officials that were saying it'd be more expensive, for them to run during November, and I don't care about that.
Is that even true? How could that be true, though?
It was true. It is true because November timeframe, just signs cost more because it's election time, right?
Okay.
It's a general election time.
Yeah. You would think there's
ads,
cost sharing, but
right.
Okay.
Ads cost more because you have these bigger, you have in 2 years from now,
season,
right? Yeah, in 2 years from now there'll be another municipal election right before the primary, the presidential election, right? And that cost in the November election, there's already going to be candidates running ads and stuff at the presidential level, right? So, the cost is more because of that. So we were like, okay, we don't care about that, and the judges really didn't care about that either. But they were making arguments from that perspective, and none of their arguments are really sound. It was cost for candidates, etc. And they were like, well, if there's candidates that come from the Southeast and they wanted to run and it was November, the cost was prohibitive, would that be an issue? And we were like, well, now people can't run for city council because the pay is $6,500 a year. So the people that are running, all the people you're talking about, this would give people more access, etc. Anyway, so that kind of fell in his face. But Judge Cruz, again, I do think it was I think it could have been the complexity of the case. He's definitely dealt with some complex cases, but the standing argument was an easy way for them to get out of it, in my opinion. And then you still have people in the Southeast that are harmed. We just saw the results of this last municipal election, and we were on an uptick because of all the work we were putting in the Southeast on voter education, etc. We were on an uptick, and then that kind of felt like it regressed in this last election.
Truly, and I can imagine. I saw I can't remember the exact percentage. Do you of the
not
turnout?
This last?
Yeah, we'll have to fact check ourselves, but I definitely would. I definitely suspect as well that any apathy that voters have and was reflected in this last municipal cycle is, yes, directly related to the chaos going on at the federal level.
Absolutely.
And let's be clear that is intentional as well.
100%.
And part of what you were saying kind of made me think of the connection with what's going on kind of at macro, which is we're really seeing, I struggle to call it leadership, but the people in power at the federal level, they're basically just saying whatever they want to be true as if it's true when it's not. And that's to me, a very disturbing trend with these issues of power dynamics, because as you were describing the experience, it was gee, that kind of sounds like almost what the city was doing in some regards with their arguments. And so are you aware of, obviously I know you're maybe not as involved with the case now, but are you aware of any talk of recourse? And I'm also curious if through this experience you would ever come across mechanisms where the people could bring this challenge, besides a civil rights lawsuit is one way, and because this was a voting argument, it went straight to U.S. District Court. And so is there some way, maybe in the city charter, where people could petition and get the election date moved or anything like that you're aware of?
Yeah, no, great question. That's actually a phenomenal question, which I'm not surprised. You always ask me questions. But that we can get that on the ballot. That's something that we can get on the ballot. The city council has the option to help. proposed putting on the ballot, which I don't think they would do, especially with how the city council is made up. Like this, it's still a 6-3 split on city council currently, and I think maybe of those 6, maybe one of them we could get to do that. But that's one way. That's very unlikely unless the community as a whole, the entire community, not just the Southeast, puts pressure on city council. That's the easiest way.
Would love to see that, but given the current climate, might be a challenge.
Might be a challenge. So the next thing would be, the petition to get that on the ballot to move the election, right? That's something that it is going to take a ton of time, effort, energy, money, all that to get it on there. But that was a big issue, was like the community to do that. The community, for one, wasn't even aware the voter turnout, especially in the Southeast, because people weren't voting because they didn't know there was an election, as an example. And I'm going to backtrack a little bit, but do you think about last year's election? Like, there was a primary last year, right? And then we had the November election. And then, so people were getting texts pretty much all year.
Yeah, and don't forget about caucus, which is this other little piece that we can gladly dive into in a second.
And more people need to be involved in that, like realistically, because that's really how you get the candidates that represent the community on the primary ballot. So, but caucusing, for those involved with that, there was primaries, and then there was the November election, and then 5 months later, there's a municipal election, and then we have one of the most consequential school board elections in our city's history coming in this November, right? So people are focused on
hard stop.
Right.
We have one of the most consequential school board elections coming up this November.
100%.
Can you talk a little bit more about the why there?
Yo, absolutely. So, the school board was hijacked.
And this is D11
district. District 11, District 20, School District 49, District 2. Shout out to District 2. They always hold it down. That's
Harrison.
That's School District 2.
A big part of Southeast serving.
100%. Yep. And again, I'm a lifelong District 11 resident, etc. But we do a lot of work in the Harrison School District 2, and they have a phenomenal superintendent, etc. But
Wendy, shout out to Wendy.
Yeah, shout out to her. She just won an award like Superintendent of the Year or something. She's phenomenal. So, saying that to say, a lot of these policies we've seen, there's been a lot of policies that people. This would take us 3 hours of a podcast to go into all this. So I'm trying to
You could come back. Don't worry. You can come back.
But there's a lot of policies and things that are in place. Like, there was book bans proposed, right? In School District 20. It didn't make it too far in District 11. We really nipped that in the bud. But there's a big charter expansion in District 11 with the current administration. And some people are like, well, why is that a bad thing? Or whatever the case may be. But if you look at nationally the data, that how charters perform nationally, we're not talking about these elite charter schools, etc., but nationally they don't kids, English language learners don't perform well, or aren't able to get into those. Students on a 529 plan, etc., aren't usually accepted in their charter schools. Special needs students, they can just say, hey, we don't have enough staff, right? Because a public school can't turn those students away. A charter school can say we don't have enough staff, right? So,
and the danger of charters too is, like, to put a fine point at it again, is like it's really taking public money and privatizing it.
That's a huge thing, right? It's a huge thing, and it really is public private school. That's the best way to describe it. And District 11 has this with his new administration, when the board flipped and all that, they're really aggressively.
I'm so ashamed of them.
Yeah, it's embarrassing. Really aggressively are adding charter schools, and it's really pulling.
So dismantling public education.
100%. They're doing essentially what Denver did. Is what they're working on doing, and then Denver got rid of all those because their schools,
because it didn't work.
It didn't work. Their district almost fell apart, and District 11 was like, this current administration was like, you know what, that worked so well there. But it was Denver, so they probably didn't do it right. Let's try it here. They're doing the exact same thing, and that's affecting
always the beef with Denver. Here in Colorado Springs.
There's so many students that are affected negatively by it. They spent $300,000 on pouches for cell phones that the kids don't use, as opposed to like responsible parents just being like, hey, like, I put my kid's phone on school mode.
Timer.
I put it on school mode, so while she's in school, she can like text us, and that's about it. But a lot of these kids, they spend $300,000 on that, but then they also said they didn't have enough money. It's crazy. And then they're gonna have, that's a reoccurring cost. And then they said they didn't have enough money to, continue the equity inclusion department. This is before Trump was in office, right? So that was $125,000. So they took $300,000.
Right.
They took money from that and
They
spent it
dismantled
on
that.
cell phone pouches.
And they've been screwing over teachers.
Mhm.
Can we, I mean, you are probably way
Oh,
more
yeah.
versed. Let's make sure that we're talking about like the wrong
Right.
that they did to teachers.
So definitely shout out to teachers in general. Like,
Mhm.
I know that some of the biggest influences in my life why I pursued civic engagement was my parents. Some of the teachers I had has always encouraged me to speak out and really saw something in me, and they pulled it out of me that became a passion. But so in general, shout out to teachers, and really here, shout out to CSEA. You know, in District 11, it's one of the only school districts in our state that has a teachers union that was negotiating. So what School District 11 did is terminated the master agreement with the teachers union. So now they don't negotiate with the teachers union.
Very
this is the
disturbing.
first time that's happened in 54 years, I want to say.
My God. Yeah.
So that leaves a lot less stability for teachers, which is in turn going to affect our students, right? If teachers don't feel secure, they don't have the resources they need, which they never have, but nobody's negotiating for them because the district's refusing to negotiate with them, and that literally takes money, resources, time, quality instruction from our students, because those teachers are going to leave to somewhere else that appreciates them more, right? So that's been happening as well. So going back to the point that, you know, brought us here was we have an opportunity with the school board election. We have to really get 3 seats, right? There's 3 seats up in District 11. All 3 of those seats we really need to get. We could get 2. Juliet turned out. She's been a shining star on the
shout out to Juliet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
She's been a shining star on the school board for
Talk about
the last
staying
8
strong
years and staying strong. And her mental fortitude is something I hope to develop over time, because to be the only one up there doing that.
Right.
But there's an opportunity to cut that down from 6-1 to to 5-3, right? In this election, or actually right now 6-1 I said, so it would be 4-3 actually, and then that would allow sometimes the school board president of District 11, he goes back and forth on certain things, and I think there's some issues that could be won with the right candidates in there. So it's huge for District 11. I mean, it's already on the course. They're spending more money than they're bringing in, which this current superintendent has a history of at his previous districts.
Wow.
And then he usually leaves right as money's getting bad, or right
so
when
he can't be accountable
100%.
for the mismanagement, which another trend I've noticed in scenarios like this.
100%.
Yeah. And just to, I think you did touch on it, but just to bring it to people's attention too, this is one of those dynamics that I think is, I'll even use the word painful, because in our democracy, we ask people to take on this huge responsibility of managing a school district and the budget, or managing city council and the city's budget, and we don't pay them.
Right.
And they are expected to work really what is probably like more than a full-time job. And then if you're a working class individual, you have to pay your bills. 100%. So you're also on the clock full-time somewhere else. And so when it comes to these school board positions, like, that's true of them. And I mean, do they even, they probably get a stipend or something like that, or no?
No, so I think they actually just voted maybe last year, like there's a small stipend, but it's nominal, maybe like $1,000 a year. And then any costs that they incur get reimbursed to them, but that's it. So it's really like you
are volunteering.
Yeah, you're volunteering. Like right now, I'm on the district accountability committee, and some of the ladies there, again, I do what I can with the time that I have, but there's ladies there that are spending time watching, the school board meetings, and then they're reviewing charter applications, and then the curriculum stuff, and they're spending 30 hours, and some of them are single moms, or not single moms, but they're stay-at-home moms that are able to do that in the off time when the kids are at school, etc. And I should definitely shout out to them for being able to do that. But like, there's 4 men, I think, in the entire DAC, and 2 of us are black men, and both of us are a part of Men of Influence. And the reason that we're there is because he has an opportunity. He has kids in the district. I have kids in the district. We both live in the district, and he's able to, with his wife, like shift their schedule around to be able to do that. But that just shows, like, we met him in the community organizations. He's somebody that we talked to about it, had no idea, and he was able to, Gov is who I'm referencing, but shout out to Gov. but he was able to be on the DAC, and then I was able to be on the DAC. So we have at least that perspective now, of two Black fathers that are involved in their kids' life, which most of us are. And we can kind of bring a different perspective, which has helped the DAC. It's just now that current school board doesn't listen to recommendations like they normally would. So there's people like leaving that have been there for a long time because they're not, recommendations are being heard. So
well, again, there's that impact piece, and it's like, you know what, if you want to have an impact on the community, you got to show up. And no one said that was easy, right? So thank you for that work. And I just wanted to add too that I think hopefully no one tuned out. Like we were talking about the school board. Like I want to emphasize that, like, I actually don't have kids, and I hella care about this. Why do we need to hella care about this? Because this is about the future too, right? This is about honoring our children, which are a precious, precious piece of our community. And frankly, let's be very real here. I don't know if we've brought this up on the show before, but again, with the deliberate intentionality of suppressing things like under power dynamics, like, do we want a highly educated pool of citizens for the future? Like I do. Absolutely. But are there forces that see that as something that's a challenge to their power? Also, yes.
Yeah, and I'm going to comment on this like briefly, because it's like you bring up this is for a whole podcast. Whole other episode, but like it really does have to do with what we're talking about, like the larger point of these cases getting dismissed and how the ripple down, because this is a ripple down effect. They said we cannot win these offices at a state level, so we're going to invest this money on a local level in places that people maybe aren't voting or don't know about.
Right? And that local level is the closest impact, right?
And it's direct, and it's it's direct, closest, very direct, and immediate, right? So an example is a school bond. A few years back, I want to say it's almost 6 years or 4 years, something like that now. 4B, what this would have done is create a CTE facility, career technical education. So they would be able to bus high school students from all over the district to one facility. So for one, different people, different socioeconomic statuses, etc., are coming together to learn something, which doesn't necessarily happen, right? People that have their kids maybe in some of these more affluent parts of District 11, that's where they're at. They're not really interacting with other kids, unless they're in a sport or whatever, and they're not really working together with them. They're competing at that point. So they were going to create a CTE facility, where the district was going to be able to pay for, and some partners were going to be able to pay for, like certifications, like electrician stuff.
Hell yeah, like trade skills,
trades, nursing. Etc., just different certifications before the kids graduated. That fell by 7 votes.
Brutal.
Literally across the entire district, which is Colorado Springs School District 11 is the biggest geographical district in our area. It fell by 7 votes. So this is when we're talking about the impact of voting and people not realizing their power. Like there's people that didn't even know that was on the ballot. Right, and they didn't vote, and I was like, "Did you vote?" And they're like, "No."
Digit numbers,
like literally 7, right? Yeah. And when people were educated on it, they were like, "Well, how come we didn't do that?" They were not aware that election was happening.
Ouch.
Or that the impact, or they're like, "We just voted last year or presidential election,"
and with the bond, it's like, ugh, more money, more taxes, whatever. It can be easy to dismiss, unfortunately.
100%. And that was 7 votes, and that just was like painstaking, because that would have really set. Even with this current board we have, that would have set the students up for another level of success forever, right? And college is phenomenal. It's not for everybody. It really isn't. So they were trying to find another avenue, like besides, we're in a military town, besides like, hey, you either go to college or go to the military, right? And they were trying to bring a trade, more trades to the city. But I want to put a bow on this, in the fact that, like, I don't think people realize how one thing like your case, and we'll definitely talk about that, because that's in my mind one of the most important things that's happened in our city's history. And that's not to be dramatic; it's dead serious.
It's like, pretty consequential.
The impact of this is very consequential. But like, people don't realize, like, in your situation, if justice isn't done for one person, that means they can come after all of our freedoms, right?
Truly.
And they've done that with these other lawsuits and different things in other areas, and people don't realize it because it doesn't affect them until it does, right? Like the whole saying, "I never thought a leopard eat my face," until a leopard eats their face, right? And that's kind of where we're at now, is people realizing, like, they're FAFO, right? They're really fighting out now. That the inaction or not participating, or these short bursts of participation in things, aren't the key. And civil rights, the Million Man March, all these other things that were happening back in the day, people think they were instant. This is like 10 years, 15 years before laws changed. So it was a lot of people all over the country, black, brown, white allies, etc., all over the country fighting for decades to get things changed. And sometimes our vision's so small, our energy so short that we have a burst of like, I can do this for a month and then we stop, but we expect change to happen, right? It's not an instant thing. It's going to take a decade, right? But the ripple effects of that are going to be monumental in positive ways if good things happen, and we're seeing what happens when people are checked out. You know, we're all experiencing that, and
we're paying for it now.
And you're experiencing that in your case.
Thank you, Mike. Very, very well said. And so, I mean, again, we'll definitely have you back for another episode because there's so many rabbit holes that we can go down. But given, you know, what we've been saying is to oversimplify it is like awareness is key. 100%. Like, be aware because they don't want you to exercise your power. And I've been glad to see people protesting en masse as someone who was sent to jail for protesting, right? And that's part of what this case involves. But I also have to admit, I sort of have a hard time with it because I'm like, beautiful, show up in numbers. And then what? Are you going to stay in it? Because like you just said, Mike, it is a process of time. And we've definitely talked about this on the show, but totally understand that can be kind of unsatisfying, that it takes time. Like the reason I mentioned literally how many days it's been since the case is filed is to hit that point home, is how much time and the experience of that as the individual, you know, in part like having my innermost life on deck for this case, like the things that I've provided to my attorneys to make the case and whatnot. But so all that said, what, if any, thoughts do you have for people here in Colorado Springs? Because we know we have a particular political climate, and I'd like to say I really think that is shifting. That as we try to weather this chaos era together, including witnessing like total dysfunction at the federal government level, you know, what could you just say to people with your brilliant brain, that maybe even some words of encouragement?
Yeah, I'm an eternal optimist, Jack.
You have to be like, to do this work, right?
I really feel like I am, but saying that to say, for one, show up, right? And I just put up this thing, a post on Facebook the other day, like, nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something, right? So find out where your niche is. Like, you might not be the person to go protest. Like me personally, me as a black man
and a girl dad,
and a girl dad. Like I'm not going to be out. Yeah, I see how reactions have happened to protests and how they've turned violent because it's been escalated by the police, etc. And so for me, that's not my role. Like I've been to protests, but as a girl dad, I don't want to leave my girls without their dad, right? So for me, that's not the place I'm showing up.
And let's be real, like people with melanin, you're a black man, I'm a Chicana, like there are different consequences 100%, we face. 100%,
like absolutely, like unquestionably. So like that might be somebody's role, right? Is I'm going to show up and, you know, stand for my BIPOC brothers and sisters and do this and that, and that's one role. But then, like you said, me and you've had this conversation I feel like a million times, like then what? Because the protest is cool, like it was so phenomenal seeing the country,
it has its own impact, and it
undeniably does. But that has to, if it's a protest and it goes away, was it worth anything? Right? So that has led to some other things, and I just want people to know, like, it might not be your idea and it might not be something you agree with 100%, but show up for other people the way you'd want people to show up for you and for an issue that's important to you, right? Like our queer brothers and sisters, right? Like they're under a tremendous attack under this administration, as an example. Like trans men and women have to, you know, they're getting forced out the military and they're going to be out like in less than 60 days, and people don't even know that's happening, right? So there's a lot of different things that are happening, and it's harder for them to show up for this fight. We should be able to stand side by side or even stand up in front for them while they're dealing with what they have to deal with. And there might be a time where, you know, like during Black Lives Matter, we had our queer brothers and sisters, other people, some white allies that were standing up for us while we're doing that. But we also have to do the protest in conjunction with showing up to vote, which is, people are like, that's one thing. Yeah, it's one thing, but it's a huge thing, right?
Yeah.
So getting the right people in office is a huge thing to get our agenda done. Be willing to meet with people in the community about like an agenda, right? Like in the Black community specifically, there's a lot, like somebody made this comment and I vehemently disagreed with it. A younger person made this comment about like we don't have these leaders anymore in the Black community. Well, for one, we had we had a whole generation of potential leaders incarcerated with the 97 crime bill, 98 crime bill.
That's the 3 strikes.
Yeah. So we had a whole generation of leaders that were incarcerated. That's one point. But then the second thing I noticed is that people don't like to collaborate. If it's not their idea, they don't want to do it. There's things that I've done and followed.
Kill your ego,
with.
Man.
Yeah, it's not about me. It's about the we. It's about the movement. So like, find something that has some momentum. Maybe you don't agree with all 5 parts. Maybe there's 5 parts and you agree with 3 of the 5. Or maybe you only agree with 1 of the 5. Like, this one directly affects me. These 4 I don't really know about, and I don't know why it's a big deal. But guess what? You show up, and then those people are going to show up for the one thing that you need them to show up for. Like, you're showing up for those other things that maybe don't affect you, because eventually it all affects us, right?
Our liberation is all tied together.
Absolutely.
Like, right? If none are free, how does the saying go? I'm messing it up, but essentially, in my mind, the way I look at it is liberation for all means that I have to show up for others too.
100%.
Like, it is not on an individual basis,
and
right?
that's why it's so tiring. That's why it's so tiring,
yes,
because there's so much happening. But I just
so much gray at these temples now.
Like, I have gray in my beard now, and I don't think it's because of my kids. It's because of all this stuff. But I really do think that's what, just to simplify it, I would encourage people, like, find the thing that you do well and do that for the movement, right? Whether it's organizing
and that
people,
moves you,
100%.
Because that'll help you stay strong
and energized, because it's something that takes away energy. Like, find the thing that moves you. Get together with people in person. Like, I would encourage people, like, post COVID, people haven't really been getting together. I feel like it's more now than obviously right after COVID, but like, this whole culture was created of like people not getting together, and really community is where a lot of this stuff happens.
I firmly believe community is the medicine. It is the healing.
100%.
It is our strength. Absolutely.
100%. So like, that's what I would encourage people: get together, find what you're good at and do that, right? And even if it's just sharing it on social media, or if it's showing up to a town hall, or if it's getting together and helping amplify a message. But I just think, like, find what you're good at and what you can do, even if it's things that don't affect you, because it really does.
Yeah. Don't think you need to do it all. That's something I accepted a long time ago, is like, one individual cannot put the weight of the world on their shoulders, right? Like, your compassionate, caring heart wants to do that, but it is not a reality, right? And that's where I think some of the things we're saying, it's like, we've touched on it on this show before, and that's the idea, is because, like, these concepts and ideas are worth repeating over and over and over in these spaces, especially because one way I look at this show is I am filling the space in our, like, local media 100%. Ecosystem to really counter some of the bullshit that's out there, right? And so here's a super fun part of the show. I am so honored. I get to actually turn the tables, and now Mike is going to help me out, because there is a special announcement that some of you may have seen me make actually late last year, and I've been working on it the beginning of this year, and I'm going to be working on it all the way through 2026. So Mike has a couple of questions for me, and that has to do with the fact that I am the first person to file to run for the 2026 El Paso County Commissioner District 5 race. So
congratulations on that, right?
Thank you. This is a whole new level, like, for people like us who we have been civically and politically involved. I feel like I've always been like a bridesmaid, but now it's finally my time. I'm the bride walking down the aisle, so to speak. And as we were talking, I was thinking about that analogy that I really appreciate, where when you're trying to get people to vote, you and I have encountered a lot of political apathy too, right? It's really a matter of participating because you're not choosing to marry someone, actually. you're picking like the bus route that is going to get us the farthest together. So if you don't mind, Mike, I'll turn the mic to you again.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we can go down some questions for me that I hope people will find value in me asking for their vote for County Commission District 5.
Absolutely. What the first thing is, there's so much chaos in DC, all that. There's chaos here in Colorado Springs specifically,
Right.
as a ripple down. Like, what led you to, file to be the first county commission candidate to file, to run in this race? That's a huge thing. Like,
What's your why, right? Yeah, totally. And it's a always valid question, and I would say it's not a straightforward answer just because there are many factors, but absolutely the dysfunction in DC is a huge one, because I really want people to think about the fact that this is happening. We can't stick our head in the sand. And so we need to step up at the state and local level and get people in these elected positions who are willing to fight back.
Absolutely.
And with my track record, I am battle tested, whether it's been advocating for my HOA community against a super predatory property manager, which I'm glad to say more recently there's been some positive headway there. But like on paper, I'm also stepping up on the front lines, like putting my even private life on paper with this case in U.S. District Court, and I'm very proud now to have something to show, right? That I am committed to protecting civil rights. And, I didn't know what that would mean. Obviously, I didn't pick this back in 2021. Now, flash forward to 2025, how much more, even more profound it is to be for someone stepping up for civil rights in this chaos era.
Right.
And with regard to the case, and I'd love to hear from you, like, feel free to chime in, Mike, but like the consequential nature of it, like, it blows my mind. And I want to leverage that for this community, that I'm doing something that has impact, and it started here in Colorado Springs. And so why this, and I would like to hear after this, Mike, if there's anything to add or something I missed, but why this case is so consequential. A couple reasons, but one, it's the first one that has evidence that law enforcement, both federal and local, were spying on Black Lives Matter protesters just because of what we believed in, just because of our political speech. And the other equally important piece is that this is a complex case, but what it really comes down to is your digital privacy largely, and your free speech, which includes digital platforms, right? And so in my case, some of the main arguments are that the police coming after me and confiscating all my electronic devices and basically looking at my entire life through the digital fingerprints that we make is a violation of my privacy. And so anyone who cares about their privacy, especially in the digital world, should be paying attention to this case. And I think that is so complex because our lives are largely digital. And so I respect these judges having to, take apart these issues piece by piece. And I'm, as weird as it sounds, looking forward to hearing the oral arguments, because I want to hear what the U.S. government has to say. I want to hear what the city has to say to, frankly, like, they're obviously trying to justify some bullshit. And so, I don't know. Did I miss anything there, Mike?
I think a big thing, too, that to touch on is not just privacy, which is a nonpartisan issue, right? That's not something that's partisan. Everybody, every American citizen should want that.
Like, that's kind of a democratic concept, privacy and free speech.
100%. The second portion of it is like, law enforcement is getting so many funds. And again, I know this is just the wormhole my brain goes down. They're getting so many funds. They're getting a lot of resources. They're supposed to be professional. And the lack of professionalism that happened in your case was like unsettling.
Grotesque.
It was gross. It was one of the grossest things I've ever seen. So like being able to hold people that are supposed to be professional to an account I think along with that, the city, so that they had to change practices. The federal government, I don't know what'll happen. They're becoming less professional, every month now. But being able to hold them to a professional standard legally, I think is going to be a huge thing that comes from this case as well.
Absolutely. And thank you, because that's another piece of who I am as ultimately wanting to be the District 5 commissioner is accountability. That's something that has largely been lacking, I would say, on our El Paso County Board of Commissioners. And I am also inspired to run just my background, right? I have working class parents, and they showed me that being politically engaged is key to our democracy. You got to do your part. And having been someone who served in newspapers and in the journalism world, and then I moved on to public service, and I've had years of working for municipalities. I served 3 years in the U.S. Senate. I'm about service because I know what the impact that it has, 100%. What it means. And it's been really interesting to, already be campaigning and talking to people and having great conversations with people who are very opposite, would be self-identified MAGA. Right. It's okay. And talking to this gentleman, and something even, it was a breakthrough moment where I was okay, hell yeah, I'm doing this, is we were trading on the different pieces of Trump. And then at the end of the day, he was or at the end of the conversation, he was well, all politicians just suck. And I was all right, well, I'm not trying to be a politician. Right. I am in this to be a public servant. Right. And he was what? And I was yeah, maybe that's how we should be thinking about this. This is how we always should have been thinking about 100%. This. And that's where, another point of inspiration for me is coming from a working class background running for this is, to me, it's very disturbing when I hear candidates or elected officials say, let's treat government like business. Hard stop.
Yeah, that's not what it's there for.
That's not what it's there for. The government is not here to focus on profit margins. Right. The government is here to focus on, ideally, service. Right. We've seen the federal government fall so far away from that. And I think when it comes to the Board of El Paso County Commissioners, certainly there are pieces of county work that I think are demonstrating some excellence, some competence, but there is plenty to work on. Just like we said, there's always something to work on. And if you go to our El Paso County website and you try to find, because I've been working with people to help them find which district they live in, right? Confirm if you could be one of my constituents. If you look on that website, you will find the link to the map where you can plug in your address buried at the very bottom. Right. And I know that sounds like a little thing.
It's a big thing.
It's a big thing. Mm-hmm. And it's example of the oversights that I think that there definitely are at the county commission level, and let's be really real about the political makeup of the county. Another piece that's really motivating me to run is that I would be a trifecta of firsts. I would be the first under 40 woman of color and first Democrat in 50 years. And so do we really have equitable representation? Absolutely. If it's been 5 Republicans for more than 50 years, generations?
No. And it's traditionally, generally speaking, it's traditionally older white folks that are on county commission, and if they're not white, they're I'm trying to be measured about how I say this.
I'll say it, a token, because I've said that before.
I feel like they are very strategic about who they put there as a minority to say I'm this or that. And another question I have for you though is if some people, obviously this is a huge race, and what county commission does is one of the most powerful entities
and yet very slept on.
Very slept on. It's one of the most powerful entities, honestly, in U.S. government because of the money that comes from the federal government that county commission allocates to the different areas, allocates, et cetera. But what are a few things that maybe people don't know that county commission does that you like to let them know, why it's such an important seat?
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I think that this is a good area to convey several of my priorities in being a commissioner. But first is we all know that the housing crisis is absolutely impacting just about everyone you meet. And so what has been really disturbing to me is that there are far too many elected officials at the local government kind of just washing their hands of it and saying like, oh, well, that's not an issue for our jurisdiction. Bullshit.
Right.
Every single piece of government can have a part of the solution to addressing the housing crisis. And so that's a huge thing I want to focus on at the county commission level. Now, I don't want to give people the impression that we can just flip a switch and fix everything. But people should be aware of the impact that the county commission can have on zoning policy. And also there, as Mike, you mentioned, there's plenty of funding that comes through kind of from the federal, state to local level. And that can be allocated to addressing the housing crisis in effective ways. One of my concerns is that a lot of these programs are simply what I would call like pass-throughs, because the individual has to apply for some, whether it's rental or mortgage assistance, and then that just goes to like their landlord or the property management. It doesn't actually go towards the individual and really helping them move farther away from their housing crisis. Just another kind of Band-Aid. So I think we can do a lot better there. The county commission needs to have a stronger voice on that. And so when I say let's get real about the political makeup, is a couple of factors too that people should know about this race is that this is the first time a map has been favorable to the Democrats. And it's actually, what I understand, is like a so-called +5 map now. And I showed up along with many others to that redistricting process like it was my job, knowing I wanted to be my job. And we had to do that strategic work. And one of the things I'm so proud of, and I shout out to the El Paso County Democratic Party, as well as the Colorado Springs Democratic Socialists of America. These groups worked together to get that map, and we ended the gerrymandering of Southeast Colorado Springs. Prior to that map, Southeast Colorado Springs was, a chunk of it was in all 5 county districts. Makes no sense and seems kind of deliberate gerrymandering, right? And so we came out so strong that the county commission, who appointed themselves to make the maps instead of like map makers or other maybe more neutral people, like couldn't deny that, right? And that was our strategy. And so that's a huge factor in this, is that we have a really favorable map. I want to make sure we're activating Southeast Colorado Springs because that's a huge piece of this race as well. And so other pieces, priorities, I have absolutely community safety. And I deliberately say community safety because I believe that public safety has kind of been used and abused 100%. And doesn't have a meaning similar to what I really mean when I say community safety, because one of the things I've said before is I look at men of influence as real community safety because it's community members stepping up and talking to each other and building relationships and trying to prevent violence, you know? And so one of the big, I don't think voters typically think of this because why would you? There's a lot going on. But when it comes to the county commission and community safety, there are nexuses with both the El Paso County Sheriff's Office as well as the 4th Judicial District. And that nexus is really largely county commission has like budget power, right? And they can make like policies, procedures, things like that. But that budget power, the DA is elected, the sheriff is elected. We want accountability. So vote for someone who is going to be a commissioner who is holding other elected officials accountable as well, because you can.
That's a fundamental thing. Like there was a time that a few years back that the prison here, which, you know, budget wise, county commission oversees, et cetera, the jail that we have here, had more deaths than Rikers Island, right, in the jail, and they were all the over 80% of them were preventable. Easily 80% of them. Somebody didn't have the right medicine. Like I'm type 1 diabetic, and they weren't giving people the medicine they needed, and they said the person died from a heart attack. They died from a heart attack because they didn't have their
mismanaged care.
They didn't. They had like simple things like that, and people don't even know about that, and that's something that county commission directly affects.
Absolutely. I remember that time, and that's one of the areas where like we try to support where we can, right? And that's one of the areas that I remember standing out there outside of the CJC, where I was taken too with regard to my civil rights case. And I actually met the mother of one of the individuals who the issue with their case was they had needed monitoring because they were having mental crisis and they weren't checked on.
Right.
And that's part of why their death happened. And it turned out, like, I didn't know this, but their mother was like a neighbor of mine who I like saw her every day at the corner store. And I was like, Sandy? And that's the power of doing this work and knowing that we are also connected. And I'm so pleased to, have seen Sandy step up and go make public at county commission, public comment at county commission because of this issue. And I would say, certainly there's more work to be done. The good news is that I understand that the contract that was with a provider where really, frankly, all those deaths happened under their watch, that contract, has since changed because people advocated for that change. And so I want to be a county commissioner who is working with my constituents to affect that change. And, for what it's worth, anytime I've emailed the county commission, I've never received a reply whatsoever. So that's another reason I'm running, because I want a county commissioner and it's me who will reply to constituents. And really the other priority I would name is public health. The county, like after the pandemic, no one can deny how much the county level of government is impactful when it comes to public health. And we know that some of our public health issues still include people struggling with mental health crisis. And I'm glad to say, I think there is conversation about that. And I want to keep that conversation going and even expand it further, because public health, obviously there's a spectrum of needs there. And that can be like stable housing is health, right? There's a lot that can contribute to good health for people. And a couple of issues I've been watching just emergent that I've committed to, I need to know more about that. Because that's what this job, like as a leader, you can't know everything. You got to trust your people. You got to do the work. But you also have to be humble and, admit, I'm doing my homework. I don't necessarily know that answer right now, but I'm going to do what I can to be as competent to serve you as possible.
Absolutely.
Right. And so some of the emerging issues I've been learning about is when it comes to the care that children are in who don't have parents or guardians. Some of the resources that they might be able to receive are like Social Security payments or things like that. But it's been recently discovered that there's an argument that it is not equitable for like county government to take those resources for those children under their care to pay for their care to the county government. So that's one I'm interested in finding out more at our county level. And then, of course, there is a huge impact the county can have when it comes to supplementing like childcare, right? Because there's a lot of funding issues that have been going on right now where people aren't able to access some of those resources that they like have to apply through at the county level because cuts are coming here and here and here and here. And so that's something that, frankly, we're going to get through the chaos era. And we need leaders competent at conflict to deal with all the impact that the fallout of the chaos era. And that's who I'm pledging to be.
Yeah, no, and that's phenomenal. I just want to highlight like two things. Is county commission, our county has about 700,000 people in it, right? So this is something that impacts about 15% of our state. This race impacts literally 15% or so of our state. So it's definitely something that everybody should pay attention to. And the second thing is, you did mention this a little bit, but I don't think people realize as well. I didn't know this until, learning about this more recently, is like the county helps with like CHP plus, like a healthcare plan for youth that their parents aren't making enough, and maybe they're in that gap between Medicaid or Medicare rather, and being able to have like the marketplace insurance, and there's this gap that the county helps fill that out. They're the ones that administer that.
There are so many services that people have to apply for through the county level. And I have had the experience of being an advocate for community members on the other side of it. So I've seen the gaps, like, you know, if you had this form available in Spanish, that could be a big helper. And I think there's definitely been efforts that have been made in that area. But again, we always need to be looking out for how we can do more and do better, you know. And one thing I'd say about this district is that it is the only one that is strictly the city of Colorado Springs. And that is amazing and fascinating to me, because if you, in your mind's eye, if you picture the district, a loose description would be like, it's really the city center of Colorado Springs, from about Vickers, more or less, on the north, and then on the west it is, the cutoff is like Union, and then all the way down to like Hancock to include southeast Colorado Springs, and then Powers on that east side. So yeah, there's a ton of people in it, and I really want us to be stronger in understanding that city-county intergovernmental relationship as well, and leveraging that. That's just something that I have not seen a lot of effort or come across a lot of information. That's not to say that it's even out there. It's a noisy world, so it's possible I've missed some things, but that's another area that, as the candidate asking for your vote, I am pledging to bring this information to constituents as well, because I think that is really relevant. I'm a huge fan of giving people knowledge. Like, knowledge is power. So
no, I think thank you for going through that. And I think having you know, county commissioners that are responsible, accountable to their constituents, there's not been many opportunities where county commissioners are doing things in the community that aren't partisan. They represent everybody in the county, and not half the county or 60% of the county, but every person. So I think having county commissioners there that are from the working class, for one, that have known struggle and know what people are going through, so they're more empathetic to what people are going through, and then they have the power to help change that or advocate, is a huge thing. And I know you'll be the one that does that for our district, for sure. Thank you so much, Mike. And like, it is not lost on me that I'm headed into a space when I win, because we're manifesting that. You know, it'll be a 4-1. And I think some people would say, well, like, why even bother? Doesn't that intimidate you? I mean, sure, it can be a little intimidating, but more than anything, I think that there's so much value in being that voice for people, that especially now in a time where people are like, they don't represent me. Like, if I can do the work to actually have my constituents feel like they are represented, that is like a lifelong goal, like my purpose, and like a beautiful sacred thing to me. Absolutely. Like, this is about purpose and passion and impact for the greater good. Yeah, no, and I do want to give a shout out to our homie Naomi as well, because she just went through this. She really paved the way, and she closed a big gap. That was the closest race in that district. Between a Democrat and a Republican, like ever. And that map was not, it wasn't favorable. It was very much a toss up. And Naomi was on last season because she is such a badass. So definitely double down on that shout out for Naomi, because her work will absolutely be part of what supports my work now. 100%. And that's how I think these races go, because I think people want to just diminish it if there's a loss. And it's like, nope, like, showing up is not a loss. No, not at all. Yeah, like, it's not diminished. And I think, like, again, like, being able to have somebody who went through that experience to kind of, you know, be able to, you know, communicate with you back and forth on what their experiences was and share what they learned, and, you know, help craft policy potentially. You know, that's a good friend for you to have. You know, it's a good friend for the community. Definitely. She is one of the besties. And I feel very, very blessed that there's more than one person that I can, you know, share
like a deep relationship
Absolutely.
with from that passion place and that place of service, including you, Mike.
Oh, I appreciate that.
We're getting the warm fuzzies. Yeah. Well, I think we're almost around the minute mark that we like to honor on this show, but I would want to say I don't want to forget the question, because this is always how we close it, like on a good note. But I want to know what's good in your life and in the community, and if you have any calls to action for people from some of the stuff that you're working on.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. What's good in my life is my family. Like I think really
They're so stinking cute.
It's amazing. Like I don't think I realized how much I was gone with the work I was doing in the community, and I wasn't serving my family the way I always want to as a dad. So just being able to be back and be more present has been phenomenal for me. It's been the most energizing thing in my life, honestly. And they're all feeling better too. So that's a good thing. And then another thing is there's, speaking of city council, county commission, there's these big cuts to heritage festivals, or Fiestas Patrias, Juneteenth lost 50% of their funding, was $250, then $150, and now $75. So I would just encourage people to show up to support those organizations that are putting those things on, and advocate, because we need that represents a large portion of our community. So that's like something I would encourage people to do, is like donate to those organizations. One Body does a lot of things, and that's the organization they donate to, as well as LEF, Latino Equity Foundation, that's working on Fiestas Patrias. But show up to those things, advocate, and they don't happen without the community. So I would just tell people, like, rally towards those things. Again, they cut the funding, but us as a community, if everybody in the community gave $1 to those,
Speak on it,
to
my
each
friend.
one of those, like, those would be funded, right? More than funded. So come together with however it is, if it's time, talent, or treasure, and plug into the community. That's what I'd encourage people to do.
Beautifully said. All right. Well, episodes of Justice with Jax are recorded as a member of the Studio 809 podcast collective at the Next Us community co-working space in downtown Colorado Springs. So remember to ask yourself 2 questions. Who's telling your story? And how are you being the change you want to see in the world today? This is Justice with Jax, signing off.